welcome back.
Thank you.
It's our
Mystical herbology presentation.
mystical herbology. We have a second part of the video, so if you haven't watched first part, we're gonna leave the link below and you can go watch the first video and then you can start watching this one.
That's right.
So in this video we're gonna talk about something else.
Yes, we're gonna talk about herbal therapy.
Herbal therapy, what's wrong with it, since we already figure out what's wrong with homeopathy and we think that herbal remedies should be good for you and herbs are naturally good. So what potentially on earth can be wrong with it if God has created the herbs?
Yes, I totally understand this point of view, and I also was thinking that if homeopathy is bad, then there's nothing wrong with phytotherapy at all. This is how herbal therapy is also called. But what I found is that, yes, there are two sides. One is when we're using herbs for their biochemical properties, this is absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when we have, again, this philosophy attached to it, that it's working because of the certain, life forces in those plants, and we are trying to manipulate things behind the scenes, we will mention what kind of weird things are done to certain plants in order to increase the potential in the plants, like life force, then there is a problem, because then it again goes to the idea that God is not personal being, but permeates everything and therefore is in every single plant.
So how do they use these philosophies on herbs? How do they attach these philosophies or life force to it?
Yeah. So basically it all starts with biodynamic farming.
Mm-hmm.
And I already can hear you asking me a question, what on earth is biodynamic
What's
farming?
the difference between biodynamic farming and just traditional farming?
Yes. So with biodynamic farming, they're using a sensible agricultural practices and combining them with mystical astrological kind of practices or concepts as well. So they believe that they are collecting cosmic forces in the soil, and they use astrological sowing and harvesting calendars, and they depend on lunar, stellar, and planetary forces to grow the best crops.
Oh, wow.
Yes, one of the magazines that I've got in my organic veg box actually had an article on this, and it called it "What the Heck is Biodynamic?" Yes, that's correct. So this lady, I'll just read it from my notes, says that there are good times to sow seeds and good times to harvest crops. And we all know that it's kind of makes sense, yeah? Good times to sow and good times. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
And nobody argues with that. But let's continue what she says further. Those have to do with things like whether the moon is waxing or waning. It holds an incredible amount of sway on the Earth's water, including what's in the soil, or how constellations are interacting with their corresponding earthly elements.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Constellations is the stars and their locations. Like you've got different horoscopes, for different constellations and stuff, interacting with corresponding earthly elements. Does it not sound a little bit like astrology to you? It does definitely sound to me, because this is how we do it. If people read horoscopes, they want their lives to be in line with what the stars are telling.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to a belief that we come from the stardust, because everything was created by a big bang, and eventually all those molecules, they come to Earth and they create living cell, and then it comes to a human being. So we basically are stardust. That's what evolutionists believe. And therefore, when, you have to be in line. Basically, you are a microcosm and that's macrocosm. And if you want to have a happy life, you have to kind of look up there and search for the best solution. So this is what biodynamic farming is. And
well, as far as I heard, some things can be true, like for example the moon is affecting water and earth. So what they say is depending where is the moon at its stage, if it's closer or if it's further, it affects the juices in the plant, and it can make the juice. It's gonna be better when it's harvested at that moment. Yeah. I also have heard about this, and so I went back and I checked, and actually there's no scientific study that was done to prove that it's correct, because we even see, yes, it affects the oceans and but it doesn't affect the lakes, it doesn't affect rivers. We don't see any tides, coming, and because of the waxing or waning of the moon. And the scientific study that was done, I think the guy did it on animals, and I'm not sure how it's really connected with the water in the plants. So there is no, it's a myth, or maybe it's a theory that hasn't been proven yet. Well, what do you think about the saying when people who try to protect their homeopathy and naturopathy or biodynamic farming, they say that the science is not there yet to explain how it works. So they believe that eventually it will be possible to explain how it works.
You know what? For me, it's enough to go back to the belief system. As it said, you cure yourself depending on what you believe about your origin. So they do the same thing. They believe that we come from Big Bang or evolution, whatever, and therefore we should look up to the stars and looking for these signs to, live, to put our lives in order.
So we live according to the stars, but not according to the word of God.
Exactly. And that for me is already like a big no. I am not going there, I'm not learning from them. I don't want to take the remedies and stuff because of what these people were connected with. Where did they get their ideas from? Yes. God says, do not, go to them and do not get anything from them, basically. Actually, could you please read Jeremiah 10 verse 2, where it says something very important?
So, Jeremiah 10 verse 2, thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them.
Yes. I think that's the end of the verse.
Yep.
Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven. What are these people with the biodynamic farming are doing, or with the homeopathy? They are dismayed at the signs of heaven. They are looking and they are creating their theories and their life, they're basing their lives in accordance with the science.
I've been also reading about collecting certain herbs, and it's interesting that it was saying that you have to use a separate knife for each kind of herb, because otherwise it loses its own power or force, which you think, what? Like, I can cut same herb, it's not going to lose anything, but they say that it does. And also, when you're cutting the herbs, the most important is your intention, so your thoughts during the process. Or they said it is a sort of meditation.
Wow. So you see, there is a lot, again, connected with the life force that we were talking about. It's in the plant, and they try to preserve it as much as possible. They want it to collect, as much as possible of that. And this is not, scientific. And this is, again, it's pantheistic, it's Hinduistic, and it's occult in the philosophy.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is that I've heard that Weleda company is using occultic practices in their cosmetic preparations. And then I providentially found that they use biodynamic farming to grow their plants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, no wonder at all that they are connected with the occultic practices. And actually, their founder of Weleda is the guy who is basically the idea behind, who had an idea for the biodynamic farming. So he is the founder of Weleda company, Rudolf Steiner, I believe. And yes,
he might be the first one who started to practice it. Who knows?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Oh,
he is the one who started it.
And it's interesting that on Weleda, if somebody knows, it's a German company, as far as I know. I think. Or Switzerland, but I think it's German. It's interesting that the symbol on them, it's kind of like a stick and like a lightning or like some kind of like serpent. You're not really sure what it means. But
I have read about it and I forgot to include it. So maybe I will, maybe we'll put a slide to talk about, because they themselves actually said what it means. I think it was something to do with the god the god Mercury. Yes, and there's a lot of basically not godly,
So something to do with Greek gods.
Yes, something to do with pagan god. Yes. So Weleda. Let's listen to Claire, who is Weleda's garden manager in the UK. She says, we're working with invisible life forces, which sounds kooky, that's what she says. But biodynamics knows that not all life processes can be reduced to a simple physical or chemical reaction. And in another quote, she says, I can also select the best days for sowing by using a biodynamic planting calendar, which identifies days when the planetary influences will favor different parts of the plant. I can sow calendula on a flower day or plant beetroot on a root day and be confident that I've done my best to grow plants in tune with nature's rhythms. Again, you've got this idea, in tune, out of tune. So what I forgot to mention about homeopathy is that it's thinking that it's treating basically your spiritual problem, because they believe that your physical problem is manifested because you've got a spiritual problem. You are out of tune, and therefore these life forces, which are spiritual, are going to help to bring your life back in tune, and therefore disease will eventually stop.
So they're trying to restore the balance in you. And because we're all connected, it's all connected. We have to be connected to the nature. Nature is connected to us. That's why they emphasize so much on the force of all the plants.
And that's exactly what my next quote is going to be. They say their motto is in harmony with man and nature. But shouldn't Christians say in harmony with man and God? Nature, if you remember, is in paganism, is something that's worshipped. Therefore, they are taking so much pains to actually care about it so much. And we should care about it, but in another completely different kind of concept. What God said in Genesis 1:26 is that we should have dominion. We should be stewards. We should care about it. But we should not do it in such a way that pagans did it, by worshipping those forces.
Because pagans have confused the creator of creation. So they started to worship the nature, but it's just a creation. It's not above creator.
You're totally right. And an interesting fact that I've read in the book called Occult ABC, I was just looking and seeing if he's mentioned any herbal remedies and stuff, and there is a chapter called Weleda medicines and herbal remedies. So I will read the whole, paragraph that he said. He says, I often receive letters asking me if it's true that Weleda medicines are magically charmed. To give an open answer to this question is not without its dangers. I could be sued by the firm for damaging their trade. I hope we're not going to be serious. One of my old friends had an altercation years ago with a Weleda works in Alsace, whatever the word. It was about a booklet that Herman had written in which there was a warning against Weleda medicines. The Weleda firm obtained a ruling that Herman must either not publish the booklet or cut out the offending pages. That was the end of that booklet. In order to learn more, I bought a book from the Weleda firm. It's clear to me from reading it that the Weleda medicines are not subjected to magic charms. They are, however, pre-treated biorhythmically. This process consists of taking some of the constituents of the Weleda medicines and, at the full moon, setting them in motion of biorhythmic frequency. They're moved around at various angles to the moon, 12 times in 12 fixed circles. This information was enough to show me the nature of these medicines. I am familiar with moon magic both among primitive peoples and in the civilized Western world. I hope it will not be taken amiss that I cannot approve of this kind of pre-treatment. These biorhythmic ideas go back to Rudolf Steiner, which is the founder of the Weleda Company and biodynamic farming. He used theosophy, spiritism, and magic in constructing his philosophical system. Years ago, I saw a newsletter from Steiner in which he gave instructions for the conduct of spiritist table tapping. This is enough to make me reject anything that comes from Rudolf Steiner. And Weleda. And Weleda. And it should be enough for us to reject anything that comes from Rudolf Steiner. Table tapping or table turning is like Ouija board. Yeah. Only a big table is used.
Which is occultic again.
Yes. And he was, as I mentioned, the founder of the Weleda Company and a pioneer of biodynamic farming. So, briefly on his views, because as we mentioned with Samuel Hahnemann, he was a founder of homeopathy, we go back to Rudolf Steiner, who is a founder of Weleda and biodynamic farming. We don't know how many more other companies use biodynamic farming in there. But we can research into this and make sure that we list these things.
Yeah, the thing is, when you take the product from the shelf, it's not going to be saying made on biodynamic farm. It just says organic or
exactly
not tested on animals, vegan, non-vegan, but we don't know such information. You have to go to internet to research.
Yes, and now I'm really, before I even buy something like a big complex made from natural herbs, whatever, I go and I look at the founders and what they believe. And if they talk about the natural stuff, like, how, I don't know how to explain it, but if they're not using these spirit words and, kind of forces and all that stuff, and they're really just talking about how they are obtaining all these things and there is no cookie spooky thing, then I know.
Farming.
Exactly. Another word we should be aware of is anthroposophy. Anthroposophy? I'm not sure where the stress should be, but yes, this is another thing that goes back to Rudolf Steiner, and this is one thing that Weleda firm uses on their website to say, this is the philosophy basically behind it, anthroposophy. Just be aware of anything that is with it. So he was, even Wikipedia tells us he was a clairvoyant. He was talking with spirits to gain his information. He was already promoting, as Kurt Koch mentioned, promoting table tapping, which is already a big no-no, contacting spirits to answer your questions. Yes. So we already can reject anything.
So we know that his knowledge didn't come from within himself. His knowledge came
even if it would come from within me, but not from within, God's knowledge.
Yeah,
basically, science. Science is actually proving that what God gave us is good.
Yes.
But when it goes to all of these God is in everything and all that stuff. This is rejecting the God of the Bible. So I'll just read the quote. His views on therapy also included many new ideas on exercise, art therapy, thinking, meditation, right? Magnetism, which is hypnotism, etc. The origins of which are obscure. Although, like Alice Bailey, if you know anything about Alice Bailey, she was like basically an open Satan worshipper.
Oh, wow.
Thomas Morgan and Edward Bach, he claims revelation from the spirit world, right? Higher faculties, as he calls it, for much of his material. All of this is so clearly Paracelsian that it's difficult not to believe that Steiner simply reworked and modernized that medieval system. And we will mention both Edward Bach and Paracelsus further on.